Assembly, we're going to get started. We're just going to set the clock right now. Would that work? Okay. Well, I'm going to welcome everybody tonight to our November meeting of the Dorado APAC. The 2019 Chair, John Davey. Where's Brooke? Brooke's right in front. Secretary Brooke. Dorado Vice Chair, Tim White Vice Chair. We're going to start by calling the meeting to order. Okay, I'll call the meeting order. No, I'll work the slides. The first thing tonight, the first thing to do is adopt our meeting agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda is published. Very well, move on from that. And then the first thing we do is we allow opportunity for public comment for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. So if you have a comment about anything else that's not on the agenda, we're going to ask you to come up and speak at the microphone. Crowded room, we're going to have comments tonight at the microphone. We can't do this from the crowd or else it just get lost. So if there's any public comments on anything else other than this agenda item, awesome, then we'll move on. And then typically what we do is we have supervisor communications from District 1 Supervisor John Heidel. John's on vacation this week. The board had a holiday, so we took advantage of it. In lieu of John's presentation tonight, District 1 Planning Commissioner John Vega is in the back of the room, and we're going to call him up. And he's going to just describe a few items that have been run on the Planning Commission to keep everyone informed.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I have name tags here and a pin so that we know who each person is. Can I ask for that?
If you have enough. If you have enough.
I may run out.
If you have the opportunity to do it, yeah.
I got a question for the fire marshal. Exceeding the capacity. Oh, sorry. I'm glad to see you all out tonight. So it's exciting. So forward to some good comments and stuff. Again, my name is John Vang. I'm your District 1 Planning Commissioner. Just want to report. Supervisor Heidel asked me to report out about what happened at the Planning Commission the other week. We approved the Vineyards project, and we also approved the EDH Folsom Storage Facility down on Green Valley Road at the county line. And we also approved the Serrano J7 project that's on Bass Lake Road. There was an appeal that was filed, so that's going to go to our supervisors. So I wanted to just quickly go over that when we get to the main event. But if you have any questions or anything, any brief questions, feel free to let me know now. All right, hey, that was easy. Okay. I'm here most of the time. So, all right, thank you guys.
So, no guest speaker tonight. We had some housekeeping minutes that were at the end of the agenda. We're going to do them right now because it'll take a minute and a half. Our officer nominations for 2020 for APAC will be doing the election next month. And right now, the existing officers have agreed to continue their terms next year. APAC voting members have the opportunity to vote on this nomination. This is their slate right now. They've copied and trying to be the chair again next year. John Raslier and Tim White have agreed continue on as vice chair. Brooke has agreed continue on as secretary. So the election is going to be held at our December 11th meeting. And then if they were new officers, we would take those positions in January, our first meeting. But just that's just housekeeping. And then these are the items that John had just mentioned. The Vineyards, Toronto Village J7, and EDH Folsom Self-Storage. Okay, with that, here we go. So tonight, we have a single issue item on our agenda, and that's the Central Elbert Hill Specific Plan. We have representatives from Serrano Associates tonight, Rick Bones here, Andrea Howard, and they're going to make a presentation. So our intent tonight is to allow them to make their presentation so we all educated about this. We see what's proposed, what's changed from the original documents from 2012 through 2015-16. They're going to tell you where the project's at now, to describe sort of what's in the process, what hearings will be coming up. So what we're going to do is if we have questions, we're going to do it at the end of the presentation. And because this is a crowded room, when we have 20 people here, we can have a discussion among ourselves. Can't do that with this crowd tonight. So if you have questions, we need you to come up to the microphone up here. We need your name and just identify, you're in El Dorado Hills, or if you want to identify your village, it's fine. But it's important for us to have this discussion so everyone can hear and be informed that you make your comments up here. And so that's how we're going to do tonight. And when the Planning Commission does their show in El Dorado Hills in January, it's much more restrictive. So this is a learning opportunity for them. So with that, I'm going to skip past what was presented 100 years ago. Probably feels like it, right? 2013 project description. I'm pretty sure we've all seen it. It involves the old golf course, the other area across the old Ridgeview project, but now it's proposed as the Petrichor planning area. I'm going to go through this real quick. These are the proposed Planning Commission hearings. There's a hearing tomorrow in Plattsville at 8:30 a.m. There's a second hearing on December 12th in Plattsville at 8:30 a.m. The Planning Department, the Planning Commission have agreed to add 2 more meetings on this matter. One will be here in El Dorado Hills at a location to be determined. It will be in January 2020, and that's an opportunity for residents to make public comment, to hear about the project, to hear how the process is going. But you can make your comments directly to the Planning Commission. And it's kind of hard when it's in Plattsville on a weekday morning, but this will be in the evening in El Dorado Hills. So when that date's available, we'll put it on the APAC's website. We'll share it everybody else. And the last hearing for the Planning Commission right now is hasn't been scheduled yet, but it's believed to be in January and February 2020, and it will be in Plattsville. And again, when those dates are known, we'll share that. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kirk and Andrew.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kirk Bone with Serrano Associates, City of the Table with Andrea Howard. And I think everybody knows Andrea and Dave Robinson who's on traffic engineer. So let me just start off by saying what's changed since the last time we were at APAC. Not much. We've made 3 adjustments to the project since we started. One was we were asked by the county to reduce the densities on the multifamily parcels, which we'll see from Andrea in a second. But generally, they back up to the shopping center and up against El Dorado Hills Boulevard on the north side of Serrano Parkway. We've agreed to limit those to 14 to the acre unless they're senior housing, and they go to 24. So that was one change there, and that's why when you hear the number 737 as opposed to 1,000, that's where that number comes from. That's one change. Second change is, as most of you will remember, we spent a lot of time talking about constructing a pedestrian overcrossing over Highway 50 on the south end of our project, next to, adjacent to the park. In the course of development agreement negotiations with the county, that shifted to, we would prefer that you construct Country Club Drive all the way from El Dorado Hills Boulevard to Silver Lake Parkway. And would you provide the funds necessary to get the pedestrian overcrossing shovel ready so that we can go apply for a grant? The county DOT director is very confident that that's a shovel ready project. He can get a grant from the state of California. Those of you who have followed the SB1 saga, which is the gas tax, as you know, the governor and the state have shifted dramatically from roadway improvements, once you voted for roadway improvements, to pedestrian and mass transit. So there's a lot of money available for that. So those are the only real changes that have occurred to the project since we were last year, and I can't remember the precise date, but I know we presented this project at APAC several times. Can I have the next slide, please? These are the things that were listed here, and we'll tick through those one by one. We'll start off with the application history and some planning principles. We'll give you a little background on the executive golf course. Andrea's going to talk about the project setting, some densities, some land plans, quick summary of the specific plan use summaries, the trails and bikeways. Andrea will give you some more detail on general plan consistency. Then I will come back and talk about the development agreement. And then Dave Robinson will, before I come back, Dave Robinson will talk to you a little bit about the traffic mitigation measures that are in the proposed project and before the Planning Commission. Let's go to application history. I had the pleasure to talk to a reporter from the Sacramento Business Journal about a week and a half ago, and he said, why so long? And I said, well, let me explain what's happened. The Board of Supervisors authorized us to proceed forward with this general plan amendment at the end of 2012. In 2013, which is required by the California Environmental Quality Act, or what we will shorthand refer to as CEQA, requires that there be a published notice of preparation and a scoping meeting. That happened, I can't remember the precise date, but that happened in 2013. I think it happened at the elementary school down off of Silver Valley Parkway on the south side. After we took all those comments into account, which were many, we then proceeded to start to write the draft environmental impact report. Well, that was about the time that, if you'll remember, in the fall of 20, there were three initiatives that qualified for the ballot on land use, M, N, and O, and they were qualified about the middle of 2014 and scheduled and actually went on the ballot in November of 14. M and O in particular would have had dramatic impacts on how the project could or couldn't happen. I think those of you who were around then will remember the signs that said the boat no on M stop the golf course. So we kind of had to tread water a little bit to see how those initiatives came out in November of 14. M and O, all three of them lost at the ballot. So it was kind of full speed ahead, but again, those of you who remember, there were two additional initiatives that qualified for the ballot, but not early enough to get on the November 14 ballot, but were placed on the June 2016 ballot that also would have some impact on the planning for the golf course. So we kind of worked on the process and proceeded to release a draft EIR at the end of 2015. Literally, I think the day that we released the draft EIR, and I think we had a meeting down at the elementary school again, we received from the California Supreme Court a very important land use decision relating to air quality called the Newhall Ranch decision. That immediately forced a recirculation of a couple chapters in the EIR, because with the general plan amendment you have to respond to the rules as they are. There's no cutoff date upon which rules apply. So we had to kind of go back and figure out how we would respond to the Newhall Ranch decision that came out at the end of 15. By the time we got that figured out, which was into 16, we had two more ballot measures. We had two ballot measures on the ballot, E and F, not the CSD's measure E, but a countywide measure E, relating to traffic and a general plan matrix. As you will remember, Measure E passed, Measure G did not. Measure E was immediately challenged in court, and significant parts of that were ruled unconstitutional. That still presented us a challenge with how do we evaluate traffic with those particular rules. That took the better part of 16, waiting for that election, then waiting to see how we would deal with that, and then the court decision came down in 2017, about what was applicable and what was not. The county then had to go through a process of determining how we would evaluate projects going forward. That lingered into 2018, and we worked through those issues, and then again. And towards the end of 2018, I think it was a Christmas present from the Supreme Court, they handed out another decision on air quality called the Bryant Ranch decision. That took us about 6 months, well into this year, to figure out how to respond to that. When I say we, I mean us working with the county on how those issues are dealt with. So that led to the release of the final EIR, as you know, a couple weeks ago, in responding to all of those issues. As John pointed out, we start with a planning commission hearing on November 14th. There'll be another one on December 12th. We'll have a commission hearing here sometime in January in the evening, and then back again sometime either late January or early February for a final recommendation from the planning commission. I would encourage you, if you see on the bottom there, and we've loaded this up on your website so you can print out copies of it, but to go to the Legistar. If you go to that site, you can see all the staff reports, all the 3,000 pages that are associated with what the Planning Commission is going to begin to discuss tomorrow morning. Next slide. Before we get into some specifics, I want to mention a couple planning issues or principles that we have to comply with. If you'll remember, when Schwarzenegger was governor, the legislature passed and he signed Assembly Bill 32, which related to a commitment to reduce greenhouse gases to a certain level. I think by 2020, I think we were committed to lower to 1990 levels by the year 2020. A significant piece of that legislation had a hole in it, which really related to land use, because that's the primary source of mobile emissions. In other words, people getting in their car and driving somewhere. So then Senator Steinberg developed the follow-up legislation, Senate Bill 375, and I participated in a lot of those discussions at the Capitol, which was kind of some implementing language that was required by Assembly Bill 32. The key component of that for local land use planning was that Senate Bill 375 directed the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which in our case is SACOG, to develop a sustainable communities strategy. SACOG adopted their first SCS, as we call it, in 2013. They re-adopted in 2016, and I believe by the end of this year they will have adopted a third sustainable community strategy, and that just relates to mostly to air quality and transportation issues. So that's an important factor, and as you will see in the staff report, this is a project that can be found consistent with that regional plan, which is not an unimportant fact, given that those of us who sat through the SB 375 negotiations, Senator Steinberg's office got a commitment from folks like the Planning and Conservation League and the Sierra Club and those kind of traditional environmental groups, that if we brought forward projects that were found consistent with that plan, that they would not challenge those projects. There was some minor streamlining in that bill, but it didn't end up doing much good. The next thing I want to mention is also a SACOG project, and it's called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. In the state of California, every community, whether it's a county, whether it's a city, is required by state law to take their fair share of growth. And they have to demonstrate to the state that they can take their fair share. You can't just decide by state law that we're not going to allow another house to get built, another apartment to get built. And if you don't, the state basically takes over your land use planning. I mean, it's not an insignificant issue, and it's not limited to El Dorado County, it's a problem elsewhere. SACOG will be adopting the RENA allocation, I think, soon, by the end of this year. And the allocation for El Dorado County for this cycle, which is 2022 through 2030, is about 5,000 units. I will say that from the time that this project has begun, we are on the third allocation. There was around 4 that ran from 2010 to 2015, and around 5 that ran from 2015 to 2021, which is where we are right now. So, as far as the state of California is concerned, everybody has to be able to demonstrate that they can take their fair share, and it's an ongoing process. So projects that may get approved this year or next year may not be the supply that fits into the current RENA cycle, but they might fit into the next cycle or the cycle after that. So it's an ongoing process, but in the end, if you can't demonstrate that you can meet those allocation numbers, the penalties are very severe. And I think you've heard the governor recently talk about some of those things, like denying you transportation funds or other things like that. So it's not an insignificant issue going forward. The next thing that I want to touch on just very briefly is the general plan. The state of California requires that every community develop a general plan. And there's kind of a misconception out there that the general plan is the land use map or the zoning that's in place at the date the general plan was adopted. There is a land use map in the general plan that shows the land uses that are in place at the time the plan was adopted. But the real purpose of a general plan is to provide a vehicle for you all at the local level to determine and evaluate how you will plan and grow for the future. Remembering the state of California says you have to take your fair share. So what general plans are really all about is setting up policies and guidelines for future growth. As a matter of fact, our general plan is called the 2004 El Dorado County General Plan, a plan for managed growth, open roads, a plan for quality neighborhoods and traffic relief. So it's not about general plan is not about the land use map that's in place at the time it's approved, although and it can be amended. But what a general plan does is provide local authorities the ability to evaluate projects' future growth going forward. One of the things that I like to mention as we talk about this project, and if you go down to the Legistar thing, there's attachment 6, which is a general plan consistency analysis. There are 121 policies in there that projects like this have to be evaluated against. The determination that the staff has made and their consultants is that we are consistent with all 121 of those policies. That's those policies, and if you go look on it, it's 35 pages. It's not the most exciting reading in the world, but the point I'm trying to make is that that's why you have a general plan to determine how you're going to grow in the future. Next slide, please. As many of you know, a significant portion of this project is on what was the old executive golf course, and we closed that course at the end of 2006 after sustaining lots of losses. I just want to emphasize a couple points, and actually it's pointed out very well in the county staff report, I think on page 6. But prior to us closing the golf course, we hired the National Golf Foundation. We did, Serrano Associates, to evaluate that course to see if there was a path forward for it to operate as a golf course, at least to break even. And the answer was no, it didn't happen. After we announced the closure of the course, the county and the Community Services District also hired the National Golf Foundation to do an evaluation to see if there was a way, with our encouragement by the way, if there was a way that this thing could be operated going forward and not be a fiscal drain on either the county or the Community Services District. And the quote that I've got in there is directly from that report that the county and the CSD paid for and utilized. And it's pretty straightforward that it didn't work. Confirmed our conclusions. I just want to say that between 1998 and 2006, we lost about $1.7 million operating that course. Rounds of play were at their peak in about 1988 at about 85,000. By the early 2000s, they had dropped down to less than 50,000 per round. We spent a lot of money trying to figure out how to keep that course open. I will also say that we began in the year 2000 providing disclosures to our buyers, not just in property adjacent to the golf course, but throughout the entire Serrano project, that there may be other uses for that course going forward. And so that was fully disclosed to our buyers starting in about 2000. Again, I would encourage you to take a look at page 6 of the staff report. It's a very good summary of what I've mentioned here. And then on the next slide, I always enjoy looking at these older pictures. Obviously, the one on my right is your left. It's 1993. That's about the time. For those of you who have been around for a while, you'll remember that for a long period of time, the cart paths were dirt; they weren't concrete. We made a substantial investment, and when you had bad weather, you couldn't play in the wintertime in a lot of cases because you just couldn't get around. And this wasn't a very walkable course either, although I'm sure some people walked it. But we had, if you look at 2006, you can see the existence of concrete golf cart paths, which was our attempt to enhance the player benefit and see if we could increase the rounds of play. So we tried a lot of things. We put a lot of money into that course. I think folks who were around in the late 80s will remember the condition of the course in the late 80s was nowhere near what it turned out to be in about 2006 when that final slide, when I showed you that final slide. We tried hard. We tried to make that thing a going economic concern, and it just didn't work. Mostly, as we know, because there were a lot of courses built in the 1990s and the early 2000s and just couldn't compete with that. So with that, I'm going to ask Andrea to talk about some specific planning issues, and then we'll come back to Dave here next, and then I wrap it up. Anyway.
Hi there, good evening. As Kirk said, my name is Andrea Howard. I'm the principal planner for Dorado Associates. I've been with the company for about 25 years now. And I actually live in Dorado for the last, I guess since 2003 or so, I'm right here with you. I want to kind of orient people back to the specifics of the land plan. I'm assuming some of you are probably quite familiar with the land plan components, but maybe others of you don't. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and just kind of walk you through and give you kind of a high-level overview of the land plan. So we have two land planning areas we put together in what we're now calling the Central El Dorado Hills Specific Plan. We have the Pedregal planning area, which John mentioned earlier. It's about 100 acres in total size. It's completely surrounded, as you know, by existing mostly residential lots. It's bounded by El Dorado Hills Boulevard, and I should probably orient you, I'm sorry. So Highway 50 is right here. This is the El Dorado Hills Boulevard exit that takes you past Rayleigh's and La Borgata, here's Serrano Parkway, and this is when you get up to the Wilson intersection with the fire station from York. So Pedregal's 100 acres. The existing general plan land use designations are, it's a combination of high density residential, which in the general plan language, that means 1 to 5 units to the acre. That's the bulk of the property. It's about, it starts from this corner down to there, and it's all of that. So probably 94, 95 or so acres is this high density residential up to 5 units to the acre. And then the balance of it is multifamily, which gets you up to about 24 units to the acre. It's this little stretch right here, which is really just a continuation on from the other similar apartment complexes that are along the boulevard. So you have Sterling Ranch here, Copper Hill, and I always forget the name of that one. I think it's called El Dorado Village. Anyway, there's another, I'm sorry, I really forget what they are. So in the current general plan right now, you have multifamily and high density. So on the Serrano West Side planning area, it's about 230 or so acres. It runs from the border of Serrano Village D1 down to the boulevard. The former executive golf course property is sort of this triangular piece of property right there. This, as most people already know, the golf course has a land use designation of open space, and the balance of this yellow area is what they call adopted land. That's the component of the 1988 El Dorado Hills specific plan, which has governed the build out of Serrano since early 1990s. And technically, there's also a very small little piece of commercially land use area right about here. It may be just a leftover remnant from the La Borgata development. Before I kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive on the actual components of each land plan, I get to that point where I talk about different land use designations, and I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit with some visual images. So when I talk about residential density in terms of density ranges and numbers of units, you sort of have these images in your head as to identify a little bit better what I'm talking about. So in the entire specific plan, there are 4 residential densities. This village residential low, which is about 1 unit to the acre. These are going to be large, either custom homes, semi-custom homes. These are a couple examples from Serrano. This is a product that Greenbrier and Premier United built in what we call Serrano Village J. And semi-production, maybe 4,000 square feet and up. These are a little bit larger homes, so people might have family kind of a setting. Maybe they are taking care of their elderly, aging parents. There's a little bit extra room. Maybe they like to entertain. Maybe they have family coming back in to stay with them on occasion. They're a little bit bigger. The next residential density is what we call village residential medium low, about 5 to 8 units to the acre. This is a product that we did in Serrano. I think I called it Destinations. I realize it's actually where I live. It's called Village ID&E. This is kind of more typical of what you're going to see along Serrano Parkway. So if you're driving up and down Serrano Parkway, to give you an idea, that that density that you're seeing there along the highway or the parkway is about 3 units to the acre average. So this isn't much more dense than what you're sort of seeing as you drive up and down that public boulevard. And these product types, the destinations at Serrano and even where I am, the village, B&B Villas, in my case, our neighborhood is mostly empty nesters, folks that are retired. I can't even think of one house that actually has young children in them. So they're smaller units, they're great for that empty nester or a move down buyer. And just an example that I showed you. The third product type is what we call village residential medium high. Density range there is about 8 to 14 units to the acre. These are things like half-plexes, it could be condos, it could be townhomes, and this gives you an example. This is the Versante project right at the intersection of Serrano Parkway and El Dorado Boulevard. We actually have a half-plex project in Serrano called Regalo. Those, again, are great little, either move-down product or even entry-level product for, a young professional, somebody just starting out, maybe a small family. And then another example, this is the townhome example of a product that we didn't build the homes at the Parkway. We were also a developer of the Parkway, and somebody else built this example here. But again, it's a great start, early entry home for a young family or somebody that's just starting out. And then the last residential type is what we call village residential high. It goes up to 24 units to the acre. These are going to be more your traditional apartments or perhaps a condo. These are just a couple examples. And obviously Sterling Ranch is what we already have here in El Dorado. So when I go through the specifics of the land plan, I want to stress that when you put together a specific plan like this, you're sort of taking that 30,000 foot view level and looking down. We haven't done, at this stage yet, very detailed engineering drawings where we have the specifics of the lot layouts. That's something that comes secondarily after the adoption of the specific plan, if the county chooses to adopt a specific plan. It's going to function in much the same way that Serrano does now. So in our specific plan in El Dorado Hills, we have the overall specific plan approval with the allocation of the land uses and the general allocation of the types of density. And then we come in over time and process what we call a tentative subdivision map, which is the details to do the engineering where we know what's the size of the lots. Are they 10,000 square feet? Are they 1 acre? Where are the roads? Where are the connections to the public streets? How does the water system work? That is done subsequent to, so it's not going to be reflected here. So just hold with me and just think about that 30,000 foot level. So the Pedroville land use summary breaks down into, open space is about 41% of the project. It's this sort of light green that's marked with the OS. The village residential low, remember that was the 1 unit to the acre, is this light yellow that goes along the back of the lots here at Ridgeview. And it's 45 acres in total and 37 units. I think Kirk actually failed to mention, I think when we first started to, when we first started to propose this land plan, we actually started with about 65 lots here in the VRL designation, and we've now reduced it down to 37. This particular land plan, because of the proximity to Bridgeview and the existing neighbors, we have done some very preliminary lot layouts to know that when we lay out these 37 lots with respect to what's behind existing homes, we've matched to the best of our ability as close as we can, given topography and no trees and sensitive resources that we have to work around, trying to match up our rear lot lines to the folks in Ridgeview. And the lots in Ridgeview, the lots in Pedroville are equal to or actually greater in size compared to what's here. So we tried to be very sensitive to match what was already in Ridgeview, not go smaller, but to blend with what's already there. And then we've got the village residential high. It's this kind of brown color, 10 acres in total. If we do 100 units, so we're calling market rate, so it's not age restricted, that's capped at 10 units to the acre, so that could be 100 units. Or if it is age restricted, it could go up to 205. So the total potential range for Pedregal, given those scenarios, would be anywhere from 137 to 242 units. For the roadway network, this is an illustration. You have one primary entry off of Wilson. They'll come in and dead end at these 2 points. Fire department requirements state that we have to have at least 2 points of entry. We have not proposed an open access between our road, and I think this is Reddick perhaps, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Brown, okay, thank you. Anyway, we haven't proposed a roadway connection here, but because of the fire access requirements, we need to have at least a secondary access, which will, in our proposal at this point, is what we call an emergency vehicle access point that says the road will be gated here. It'll act as a secondary unit only in the case of an emergency. So it's not going to be open access for everyday travel. It will be only utilized in the case of an emergency, whether people from Pedregal need to get out through Ridgeview, or even Ridgeview needs to get out through Pedregal. But again, it'll be a monitored gate situation, so there's no open access. Moving on to the Serrano West Side land plan. 57% of the project is open space. So again, it's that green OS designation. There's a little bit here over the linear corridor that goes along Eldorado Hills Boulevard. We have VRML, the Village Residential Medium Low. This is the area here. There's a little block here south of Serrano Parkway, and a little block there north of Serrano Parkway. It's 30 acres in total, 156 units. That's the 5 units to the acre. Village Residential Medium Low. See there. 22 acres. It's sort of this kind of medium orange color here, that little piece, and it wraps around there as well. It's 22 acres, 220 units, and that's at 10 units to the acre. And then we have Village Residential High, got a little piece, actually a little piece right there on the north of Serrano Parkway, and then about 10 or so acres here, tucked behind Relays and La Privada. So in total, that's 16 acres, 224 units, or 14 units to the acre. That's what Kirk was mentioning earlier, that by the development agreement negotiations, we've agreed to cap that density at 14 to the acre if it's not age restricted. If it is age restricted, then it can go to the 24 for 382. So in total, residential units range from 600 to 758 on this land plan. The roadway network here is somewhat illustrative. Again, we know that we need 2 points of access, so we had to lay out at least some rough idea of how we think that network is going to lay out. We have one road coming from Serrano Parkway down to what we call the future Country Club Drive, Park Drive extension, which is this heavy dashed line. These roads here will be private. We'll have gates here and there, one there, gate there, and another there. So you'll have, for this northern section, you actually have 3 points of access, either at Wilson or on the Eldorado Hills Boulevard or on the Serrano Parkway. And as we get down to that further level of engineering, we will look at what the unit, the lot layout looks like, the lot sizes, the unit type, and determine what our intersection capacity is going to be, whether these are full intersections, meaning full in, right out, or if they're restricted in some way to maybe just a right in or a right out, or maybe even just restricted period to a right out. So that will be a future exercise that we can only really perform when we really know the details of the land plan and what the traffic capacity is. And then, last 2 major components. This we call Civic Limited Commercial. It's 11 acres. It's this rectangular piece of property just north of the fire station. We've put in a range of uses, of potential uses in the specific plan that could be parks and recreation, it could be a senior center, it could be office space. If the CSD needed more administrative space, that would work at that location. If you need a sheriff's substation, that's put into the plan as well. So it could be a range of uses. Of course, when you drive, I'm sorry. And then the last one is the village park, which we're going to call it community park now. It's 15 acres. It's right here against the highway, tucked behind Rayleigh's, and sometimes people will ask, why did you put village park right next to the highway? Doesn't that seem kind of silly? It's loud or whatever. There's a couple of reasons why we put the village park there. It happens to be because of the grade of this property, the flattest part of the Toronto West Side land planning area. So in order to kind of maximize the amount of park impact fee money that's going to improve that area, we were trying to limit the amount of grading that would have to be done so you could actually get more bang for the bank to get, gazebos or concession stands or what have you. The second reason was to have the ability to have lighted fields so that we've put the park as far away as we could from residential uses to allow for that lighted play. So it extends the athletic field and tournament ability for the CSD to have more sporting activities. Let's see. One thing I failed to note on this land plan so far is the portion of the adopted plan, the Eldorado Hills 1988 specific plan, includes something called Village D1 Lot C and D, and that's a combined 135 units that are part of the Eldorado Hills specific plan. And with this proposed specific plan, we are proposing that we take the Lot C, which is roughly this area here, and then another thing called Lot D, which hugged the old golf course boundary right about here, and convert that into permanent open space. So we will relinquish those development rights and keep this, and you'll see maybe a little bit later another picture, a very prominent oak-studded ridgeline that we think is an important scenic value. So to throw this all together in one specific plan, both planning areas, you've got 56% of the project, 190 acres is devoted to parks and open space, and a total of 336 acres. And this was the ridgeline that I was just talking about. It was called Village D1 Lot C and D, and like I said, this would be in permanent protected open space. A little bit about the trail network, because in a project like this that's infill, you have great opportunities to have a strong pedestrian network and to describe. We have a class 1 bike trail that goes down to the fire station right now. It continues on along Eldorado Hills Boulevard to Serrano Parkway and then terminates. With this plan, what we're proposing is to take that class 1 bike trail, move it on the other side, and run it through a linear trail corridor that's a lot more safe and would be something kind of similar to this kind of experience. You've got a nice protected corridor that's not on a busy lane of traffic, and it'll pick up underneath the golf cart undercrossing and take you through another linear open space to access the park and then the future pedestrian overcrossing. This slide just details a little bit, when Kirk mentioned the 121 consistent policies. This breaks down by land use, or excuse me, by the general plan elements. You can refer to attachment 6 for that detail. But I did want to highlight just a couple of key general plan policies. Again, you can see this discussion in the staff report attachment 6. Policy 2112 about community regions and policy 8015 housing both have a discussion about community regions. And our general plan basically sets aside 3 areas. It's something called a rural region, which are the areas of, for example, the agricultural lands or natural forest lands that the county says we want to protect these from encroaching growth. It's called a rural region. Within those rural regions, you have something called a rural center. Those are things like maybe like cool or fair play. So you have some limited amount of services, some retail or what have you in that rural region area. And then they have community regions, which are El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Shingle Springs, that kind of thing. And community regions are the area where the county says this is where we want to direct our future growth, because in the community regions they have services, they have infrastructure, they have all the things that are necessary to support a higher range of density. So 2112, again, this is where you direct the highest intensity of compact development. With this project, we have density ranges up to 24 dwelling units to the acre, excuse me. And then, of course, because it's an infill project, we have complete connectivity to existing infrastructure that has capacity to serve the project. Land use policy 2252 about planned developments. I won't belabor this point, you can read it there. It's again based on availability of adequate infrastructure. Again, on the community region. I touched on this earlier. Policy TC4I is about non-motorized transportation, so in community regions, include a pedestrian bike path, which I just illustrated with the prior exhibit, and we're building about 7,800 or a mile and a half of new trails as part of this project. Policy 6741, air quality, again, this kind of ties to TC4I, so if you want to reduce your dependency on the automobile, by integrating land uses and creating a pedestrian network, you can encourage non-motorized transportation. And certainly we've done this with sort of this idea of horizontal mixed use, so we're placing residences in direct proximity to existing retail services. On water supply, I know that can be a big question in people's minds. EID is the water purveyor, and when we initiated the project review, EID did a study called a water supply assessment, and it looks at, it analyzes the demand from future growth, it compares it with its existing and planned water supplies, and in essence it concluded that there is plenty of water supply to serve this project. And to break it down a little bit, so when we launched this project, there were a number of other projects that were going through the analysis phase as well. And so the water supply assessment considered all existing demands. It also included the demands from this proposed project, which amount to about 450 acre feet of water per year at build-out, which was assumed to be 2035. It assumed demands from Dixon Ranch, Lime Rock Valley, and Marble Valley, Village of Marble Valley, which are also proposed. And it basically concluded that, for example, in a normal year, total demand is about 67,000 acre feet per year. The supply in 2035 is about 110 acre feet. So there's a surplus of, in this case, 43,000 acre feet per year. And then it goes on, then it drills it down. What happens if you have one dry year of drought? What happens when you're in a multi-year, maybe 3 years of drought? And this figure here summarizes, and you can read a little bit more about it in this table 5.1. So assuming all of the anticipated demand and all of the supply, the surplus ranges between 7 to 42 acre feet per year. The other concern too is about obviously school capacity. Where are the kids in this development going to go? We have concerns about capacity in our schools. There's issues at high school and elementary school, and it's similar in concept to what I just described in the for the water supply. Is that our school districts are the ones that take the responsibility to analyze their enrollment and their capacity. They do this on an annual basis with demographic studies, adopting master plans that look at their facilities and accommodate, make projections about the projected growth and the demand for the student population. And the environmental document concluded that no additional facilities were needed. We're going to be served by Buckeye Union School District, so Elementary schools are going to be Brooks, Oak Meadow, Silver Valley, thank you. I'm sorry. The middle school, obviously, Rolling Hills, and then the high school, Oak Ridge. How we mitigate for the impacts to those schools is paying either school impact fees at time of building permit, or we fund a CFD, a Community Facilities District, to provide the Melrose funding to the school districts to build the facilities that they need when they're needed. And then I touched on this one, Village D111C, Policy 7443. So it talks about oak woods and where are you conserving the oak woods that make the most sense and limit fragmentation and provide the background for the wildlife by converting the residential areas of Lot C and D to open space. It meets Policy 7443. Quickly, I just want to kind of run a scenario. Under the existing general plan, like I mentioned in Pedregal, there was existing high-density residential and multifamily land use designations. In that planning area, under the general plan, maximum development potential could yield as much as about 600 units. If you add in what we're calling Serrano West Side, this is the 135 units at Village D1, Lot C and D, you have a potential maximum of 760 dwelling units. What we're proposing under the central plan would be Pedregal from anywhere from 137 to 242, Serrano anywhere from 6 to 750, for a total of 737 to 1,000 units. So even at the lower end, it's very comparable to what the anticipated yields of the general plan dictate now. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Robinson to talk about traffic.
Brief intermission.
Wanted to know.
Again, my name is David Robinson. I work with for Farron Cures. We prepared the transportation analysis for the project for the environmental impact report. I'm going to walk through the mitigation, the required mitigation for the project based on our analysis. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of background on what the CEQA analysis is and what the general plan requires. So we analyzed the project under 3 scenarios. Our analysis is consistent with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, as well as the county's general plan. So CEQA requires that we analyze the project under existing conditions and cumulative conditions. Existing conditions is if the project was developed tomorrow, and what would the impacts to the transportation system be with that project occurring tomorrow? Not necessarily a realistic scenario for a project of this size, because this project is going to take several years, many years to develop, but that's what CEQA requires. So we analyze the project under that scenario. Cumulative conditions looks at the project in addition to existing traffic, but also traffic from other approved and proposed development projects. So in this case, we're analyzing the project alongside the build-out of Serrano. So build-out of Serrano at its maximum level of development. The Carson Creek specific plan, the Valley View specific plan. Valley View is the Blackstone area, as well as Saratoga Estates, which is under construction right along the Saratoga extension that's occurring right now. As well as, at this time, we had included Dixon Ranch. We had Lime Rock Valley specific plan, the Marble Villages of Marble Valley specific plan, as well as the Bass Lake Hills specific plan and Santino. So there's quite a bit of development in here. that's approved and pending, that's included in the background analysis under community conditions. The near-term scenario, that's an outcome of the general plan, and that's an outcome of the Measure E that Kirk described, but it looks at the near term. It's a 10-year scenario. So the intent of that analysis is to understand, with 10 years of growth with the project, what are the potential impacts and required mitigation. So those are the three scenarios that we analyze the project to get under. Again, that's consistent with the CEQA analysis as well as the requirements of the general plan. So I'll walk through the mitigation, and there were impacts identified at 4 intersections. So we've got the intersection of Silver Valley Parkway and Appian Way, El Dorado Hills Boulevard, Saratoga and Park, so that's the entrance into the Raley's, and this is the location. Hopefully you can see that, it's down low, but that's the future, or the very imminent extension of Saratoga that's under construction.
Yeah.
Okay, again, so this is the Saratoga extension. That's Saratoga Estates under construction right now. So we have an impact at the Saratoga El Dorado Hills Park Drive intersection, as well as impact at Town Center, Latrobe Road, and Latrobe Road, White Rock Road. So I'll go through those. Under existing conditions, the addition of the project would create an impact at both Town Center, Latrobe Road, as well as White Rock and Latrobe Road. So on these figures, these are just a simple schematic diagram that we use in traffic analysis. And really, north is up, so we're looking north is up on this map, so that's this direction up here. And we're looking at the intersection turn lane configurations, those pavement markings that you see at the intersections, as well as the traffic control. So that's representative of a traffic signal. So the traffic signal control at most of these intersections today. But under existing condition, with the addition of the project, we had impacts at these 2 intersections. The mitigation is shown in orange. So that's the change from current conditions that would be needed to bring the operations of that intersection back to an acceptable level based on county general plan standards. So at Latrobe Road Town Center, there's the need to modify the current right turn lane into a shared through right turn lane, as well as modify the current left turn lane into a shared through left turn lane on the westbound approach, as well as add a separate right turn lane. So for a total of 2 right turn lanes and a shared through left turn lane. And what that allows us to do is provide what we call a right turn overlap phase in the traffic signal. So what happens is when you're sitting at this, stopped at this intersection, you can make this right turn in a controlled movement at the same time this left turn movement's occurring. So it really increases the capacity of that intersection quite efficiently. And when you drive through there's a lot of movement. That's a very heavy movement. That's a very significant movement. So there's a lot of benefit to that right turn overlap with the modifications to the intersection lane configurations. This is really, anyone who drives through here in the evening experiences there's one lane that travels northbound all the way through the interchange. So that one lane causes a lot of vehicles to queue up today, and that queuing that occurs affects operations of White Rock and Latrobe. So you may ask yourself, why isn't there any orange shown at this intersection here? And that's because these modifications, in particular modifying and adding that additional through lane through the intersection, addresses the impact and that queue spillback that occurs today and that we were finding with the addition of the proposed project. Under near-term conditions, both of these intersections under near-term conditions without the project would operate unacceptably. So that's 10 years of growth from today at these 2 intersections at Appian and Silver Valley Parkway and Saratoga Park Drive and Boulevard would operate unacceptably. The project would add traffic to those facilities, which is considered an impact based on the county's general plan guidelines and policy. So at Appian Way, what needs to happen is we need to install a traffic signal, which is, it's currently an always stop control intersection today. Need to install a traffic signal and then provide northbound and southbound left turn pockets. So that just improves the efficiency of that intersection operation combined with the traffic signal control will bring the operations. It mitigates the project, but actually improves operations at that intersection beyond the no project condition as well. At Saratoga Park Drive, El Dorado Hills, again, without the project, this intersection was forecast to operate unacceptably. That's 10 years of growth. In addition to, in the near-term scenario, I forgot to mention that the analysis not only includes 10 years of growth, but also the capital improvement projects, so the CIP projects that are anticipated programmed to be constructed within that 10-year horizon. So one of those projects, which is nearly constructed or complete, is the Saratoga extension. So that Saratoga extension is, the intent of constructing it. It's parallel capacity to US 50. It provides an alternative to get into Folsom, and that connection is going to attract more traffic. So operations at this intersection, into that 10-year scenario, operate unacceptably. The project again contributes to that, worsening that condition. So mitigation under that scenario would be to add a right turn. A separate right turn lane. So right now there's a left, a through, and a shared through right. So we separate that through and that right to a separate right turn, and that improves operations to an acceptable level and mitigates the project impact at that location. Under cumulative conditions, similarly, this intersection is going to operate unacceptably without the project, and the project adds traffic to it, and that's an impact. So the mitigation here is very similar to what is needed under the near-term scenario, with the addition of a separate westbound right turn lane that will mitigate the impact of that location at that intersection. So that's a summary of the impacts mitigation and a little bit of background on the transportation analysis that's conducted based on CEQA as well as the general plan guidelines. Hopefully that's a little bit helpful as you're reviewing the 3,000 pages, not all traffic, but of the
Thanks, Dave. Okay, back to let me get my pages here. And this part shouldn't take too long. If you'll go to the slide that says development agreement and community benefits. Again, the development agreement, which is I believe now called a community benefit agreement, is in the staff report. These tend to reflect not only the obligations that are created as a result of the CEQA process, but representing a negotiation beyond that between us and county staff in terms of what other items would they like us to provide that are basically just exactions for a 20-year contract to develop the project. The first item is fiscally neutral. The general plan requires that any general plan amendment perform or provide a fiscal impact analysis. And what that does is that evaluates the project's impact on the county's general fund, on your fire district, and on your park district. And the goal there is to make sure that we're not approving projects that are going to be a negative on any of those governmental agencies' general funds. So to the extent that there will be negatives, and the final fiscal impact analysis will be developed with the first tentative subdivision map, which will be hopefully after this project is approved. We will set forth a mechanism to make sure that all three of the county, park district, and the fire district are whole in terms of their cost of providing services going forward. The next item is a community benefit fee. This is a $6,000 fee that is paid at building permit. The way the development agreement is written now, it's for any use that Board of Supervisors determines they want to spend it on. it's just that's as defined as it can be. But it would take 3 members of the board to determine how this fee would be spent, where it would be spent, what facilities it would be spent on. There's no strings attached. In addition to that, we have agreed to pay a property transfer fee. The first time a house is sold, after it is sold from the merchant builder, there will be a 0.25% transfer fee. At build out, we suspect that on an annual basis that will generate about $100,000 a year of revenue that goes to the county. Again, they can determine how or where it gets spent. In our conversations with the Park District, they're concerned about the project's impact on their ability to maintain their parks. We've agreed that we, as part of the first tentative subdivision map, we will evaluate the fiscal impact on the Park District's ability to maintain, and to the extent that they need some augmentation from this project to pay its fair share, we'll agree to do that. The next item goes back to the trails. As Andrea mentioned, there's about 7,800 linear feet of trails, which I guess is about 1.5 miles. We will construct those trails. They will be open to the public, as they are in Serrano. They will be maintained ultimately by the Owners Association, again, as they are in Serrano. So it will be full public access, no cost to the public unless you're a resident of this particular project, and a portion of your HOA fees or dues will go to that benefit, but those trails will be open to the public and maintained. I guess I hit on 5 and 6, actually 5 and 6 kind of go together. In the county's fee program, which is the TIM fee program or the CIP, they have estimated the cost of acquiring the right-of-way to extend Country Club Drive from El Dorado Hills Boulevard to Silver Valley Parkway at $3 million. Since we own most of that land in the Serrano open space, we've agreed that there will be a no-cost dedication to the county for that right-of-way, which should have a little bit of a cost-saving effect on the TIM fees that go forward. The third item, the number 8, which is what I talked about at the beginning, which was one of the ads that came in about a year ago. County has asked us to construct Country Club Drive from El Dorado Hills Boulevard all the way to Silver Parkway. Silver Valley Park, we've agreed to do that in 2 phases. The project traffic reports, as you would have heard from Dave, don't require it. We don't create that impact. But at the county level, they've determined that creating that parallel capacity to Highway 50 is very important. And now with the connection coming all the way from Folsom, you will sometime in the future have a connection from Silver Valley Parkway all the way into Folsom. You won't have to get onto the freeway necessarily to go into the shopping center or shopping activities in Folsom. So we've agreed to do that. We're advance funding that. The current county program contemplates that they will build a road probably about year 10, which would be, I don't know, 2020, at the end of the program, which I think is around 2035 or so. We're going to advance fund that project. The first phase will be from El Dorado Hills Boulevard, the eastern boundary of our project. The second phase will be from the eastern boundary of our project to Silver Valley Parkway. And there are some specific triggers in the development agreement that require when those improvements occur, and you can look those up in the development agreement. Item 9. As Andrea pointed out in the land use plan, there's 11 acres that's between the fire station and the archery range. We have offered that, and the current development agreement contemplates that land will be dedicated to the county upon their request for any public benefit that they want at no cost to the county. If the CSD wants, I understand the CSD may now be interested in acquiring that property. That could be a change, but that's 11 acres on the boulevard, as Andrea said, senior center, extension of the fire department. There's a lot of good uses for that. The item 10, which I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation, is that the Department of Transportation has asked us to provide the resources necessary to get the pedestrian overcrossing shovel-ready. Our commitment is $500,000. It's due at the 150th building permit. We will help the county process that application and get that project ready. There'll be some environmental review and some construction drawings, but literally they will be able to go to the state of California and say, we have a shovel-ready project. All the environmental work done, the construction plan's done. The Department of Transportation is very confident that with that package, they should be able to secure some grant funding for that program. Number 11 is the range of housing types. These are the kinds of things the types of housing that we're suggesting in this project now. Provide a range that a lot of which we don't have here in El Dorado Hills. It's more dense. We understand that there's some anxiety about that, but that's how you have the opportunity to create I want to emphasize, more affordable new product than just the traditional El Dorado Hills big house on a big lot. There's a need for that. The state of California is telling us to do that, and that's what's there now. Roadway and bike ped connections, I think we touched upon that. That's the trail system. Frankly, it's one of the cooler parts of the project, and almost that I think will be helpful. The other item, and I don't know how many of you followed this, but beginning in the late spring, early summer of this year, there was a concern that the county's TIM fee program, which is responsible for constructing, for example, the Silver Valley Interchange or the Country Club Drive extension or the Saratoga Road extension, was going to was in deficit. Since this is an infill project, and as you saw from Dave, the number of traffic improvements that he talked about are already in the TIM fee program, all the fees collected for this project will help offset that deficit that appears there now. So the net positive for the county's TIM fee program is about $23 million. For those of us who are concerned about fee levels, that's very important. Higher fees mean less affordable housing, so there's a real benefit there going forward. We've been through these numbers with the county staff on multiple occasions, and I believe you will hear from them in the next couple of months that the net benefit of the TIM fee program is about $23 million. Item 14 is the SACOG consistency. Again, somebody who worked on that legislation, that's important to me, and you can achieve that with the kind of densities that you have theoretically. In the traditional environmental groups will not litigate over the project if you're consistent with that plan. We've also agreed to contribute to the county's affordable housing fund at $500 per unit. That's through a building permit. The other item that some of you will remember came up in this item 16 that came up in the Spanish project in Town Center. They agreed to contribute some money to what's called an intelligent transportation system. Essentially for laymen like me, as I understand it, it provides kind of a high technology linkage of the signals so that the signals are in sync and can adjust to the traffic that's there at the time, not just on automatic timers. I think several other jurisdictions have that, but that came out of this process. So, well, again, not required, but just part of the agreement that we've developed with the county on the development agreement. I want to just share with you the next steps, and I think that John touched on it a bit, is that really, frankly, tonight is sort of the beginning of the second public process associated with this project. Tomorrow we have a planning commission hearing. We'll have another one in December. There'll be one down here in the evening, I presume here, sometime in January, and then a fourth planning commission hearing, either late January or early February. So there's going to be plenty of time, and frankly, the information we've given you tonight is not the most scintillating information that you've probably received over time, but it's important for us that we try to take the time to explain to you what's in this project and what the benefits are and what the planning constraints are going forward. As I mentioned to John and Tim before the meeting today, we're happy to come back on December 11th. We're happy to come back in January. I know you guys will probably want to go out and evaluate this thing and make some recommendations. So what I'm trying to leave you with is there's no rush to develop these recommendations. We won't be done with the planning commission process any earlier than the end of January, and my guess is it'll be mid-February. That's a recommendation that goes to the Board of Supervisors, and I would suspect that we will be before the board sometime in February, March, April time period. It's hard to pick a date. So there's plenty of time to evaluate, make your thoughts known, but again, you know, this presentation isn't it's not like watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, but there's lots of excitement. But we believe it's important to understand as best as we can kind of the highlights of what this project is. I really would encourage you to look at a couple documents in the staff package. The staff report, I don't know, it's 30 pages or so. The general plan consistency findings are about 35 pages. There's also a staff PowerPoint that was put up today or yesterday, I can't remember which, that provides some more highlights, which kind of gives you a summary of all the things that we've talked about. So again, I would encourage you to look at all of those things. We're more than happy to come back at whenever you'd like us to come back in December, January, talk about this some more if you've got some questions. And I think with that, am I supposed to just say we'll do questions Q&A for a while? Is that what you'd like us to do, John? Or?
Yeah, if you're available to do it. The only thing I was going to say is that, again, we have a very crowded room. You guys have been very quiet, thank you. But to have a conversation like this and ask questions so that everybody hears the questions, well, actually step forward to the microphone here in front of the room so that everybody can hear what you're saying. Just say your name and where you live in Elbert Hills. So with that, can you have anything you want to start with? Or?
I'd just like to point out, remember, this is the beginning of the process. The process, as Kurt showed, goes back to 2012-13, but this is sort of the accumulation of that long process of draft environmental impact reports, staff agreement, staff negotiation. This binder, which weighs about 15 pounds, this is only about a third of the paperwork that's available. 3,177 pages, and one of our APAC members actually counted it and was downloading onto his computer. It's taken a long, long time. So this is only about a third of that. And no offense to you, Dave, but the third of this document here that goes with traffic put me to sleep a couple of evenings because after 10 pages my eyes were spinning. But remember, it's a process. They are business people. They are doing what they're entitled to do. There's a general plan, but they have the ability to go ahead and request a general plan amendment because the general plan provides for amendments. They have the ability and the right to request for zoning. So they're going through the process that they have to do to get this development to the Planning Commission and then to the Board of Supervisors. What we as the public are doing, this is our chance to respond. Now, you can respond to APAC. Remember, we're not an official organization. We can just make recommendations. If you really want your comments to be heard, you need to get them in writing to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors. Remember, they are looking for factual-based arguments. If you disagree with something as in the environmental impact report, you say it's not right, it's incorrect, you have to say, you can't just have a feeling, I don't like it, it's not right. You have to have very specifics to why it's not right. And then the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors can address that. But if it's just emotional, like, I don't want to see any more buildings built, I want to stop construction in Eldorado Hills, that's not what this process is about. That's a statement, maybe that's a political statement there, and you're certainly to make those statements. But remember, we have a specific process here, and you need detailed information if you're going to be taken effectively at the planning stage or through the Board of Supervisors stage.
That's right. So with that, would anybody like to ask some questions and comment? Can you step up to the microphone and put it here in front of the room?
Is this a microphone?
That's the microphone right there. You can move it around how you need.
Hi, my name's My name's Roberta Tassi. I'd just like to ask how many people here are from Ridgeview? Well, we got to get organized again because this is the second time we're going to get organized. So, some of the comments. When did Pedregal become a part of the Eldorado Hills specific plan?
What we did was we incorporated it. It's not part of the Eldorado Hills specific plan. It's part of the Central Eldorado Hills specific plan, which is the proposal before you this evening. So that was part of our initial proposal that was formalized and authorized to move forward in 2020.
Okay. Now, my other question is, I know that there was reference made on the Serrano side to the 1980 general build-out and what it said for the Serrano section. For the Pedregal section, what did the 1988 general build-out say? I think it said one house per 10 acres.
as Andrea mentioned in her conversation, her notes, the Pedregal project was never part of the Eldorado Hills specific plan, which is the governing document for Serrano. There is a general plan designation existing on Pedregal today, and parts of it I think have been in place since the late 70s, of 624 units, which was a combination of the high density next to the apartments and then some less than the apartment density running up the hill.
Well, when I went to buy my house, I'm in Ridgeview. I did everything you're supposed to do. I went to county planning and I pulled all of the county maps, and it was one house per 10 acres. And even when we give comments to the planning commission, they never seem to take our comments seriously. Now they have improved what had originally been represented in Pedregal, I think in 2003-4, when we fought it there, where they were trying to do 300 cluster homes. You have improved it. But now you're taking away, you protected the oak woodlands on the Serrano side, but not on the Pedregal side. We want our oak woodlands intact. We want a buffer zone between us. And we don't want you to come and in emergency drive through our neighborhood with no reason. I mean, come on, get real. You buy the land and go north. Buy the land, go north with your fire roads. And and just go back and sharpen your pencils a little on your design. We are going to accept some sort of development in that area. And yeah, I'm not going to get my one house per 10 acres, recognize that. And I'm glad you're doing it. But keep the areas where the use right now is hiking and nature. And, there is an Indian burial ground there too, and Indian artifacts. No, you can say it, this is important to us who live there. We take our children down there, our grandchildren, and we are showing them there. You're not ever listening to us when we say, keep that area a little bit better. So cut your homes in half and put them in there. And don't make them cluster homes, because I guarantee that even old people don't want to hear someone sneeze next door. So give them some space. We're not going to do the 55 plus. I usually don't use sneeze either. I use something else. Be reasonable, and you know what? If you want to put in some high density, because this area was never supposed to be high density, it was Ridgeview East. If you're going to put in high density, I suggest look at Costco area, put it in over there. But see, make sure that thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Baker. I think I know most of you out here. I want to make a statement or comment on Mr. Bone's statement and follow up with a question. The prior golf course owner, Tony Mansour, has stated publicly on video that it was making a profit of $300,000 per year. Now, it's possible that circumstances changed. It's also possible that other factors were at work. So I'd like to read an excerpt from a SAC-B article circa 2007. Jack O'Can questioned whether figures provided to the consultant reflected the actual cost of operating the golf course in later years. O'Can, a Cameron Park resident, said he had worked in the pro shop for the past 16 years. It was hard to figure out what the costs were, he said, adding that in some cases, non-course related expenses were billed to the operation. So I want people to reflect on that. Now, Tim White made a very good point, and I agree with him. There are property rights at play here, and I respect that. I would also suggest that the property rights of the thousands of residents in and around Toronto trump the property rights of a developer to be given a rezone simply because their golf course went out of business. We should note that during the early phases of Serrano, A promotional video was produced by Serrano Associates promising a public golf course. That is the defunct old executive golf course. This same entity undoubtedly collected market premiums on homes sold in Village E2 that overlooked the golf course. My question is, what restitution would be made to those residents to compensate them for the failure to deliver on the promise of the golf course and the decreased property value that they will undoubtedly experience as a result of this high-density housing in the Toronto West Side? Thank you.
Let me just respond to that for a second. That wasn't really a question, but I'm happy to respond to that anyway. I would refer you back to the 2007 study prepared by the National Golf Foundation. And the process was funded by the Community Services District and the County of El Dorado. We didn't participate in that study in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy to provide that as a document. I think you can get it from the county. It's referred to in the county staff report. It just didn't work economically. As it relates to the folks who purchased overlooking the golf course, as I mentioned before, we began disclosing in 2000. We began disclosing to every buyer in year 2000 that the fact that the land uses on the golf course might change. We've got those disclosures in our file. We provided them to our particular builders, who in turn should have disclosed those to the buyers. So we did what we could on it.
Before you jump in, remind everybody, we got about a half hour of time in this room. Let's make the CSD. We have about a half hour of time reserved, so if we can limit our questions and comments, be pretty concise. I'm sure more people can get in and have more comments. It benefits the community and it benefits the applicant.
Don Neer, El Dorado resident. And just to follow up on what you said, Mr. Bone, you said you started alerting people back in 2000 that the golf course was going to maybe close. So you knew way back then that it was having difficulties, just to be clear.
No, we didn't. The answer was, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, beginning in about 1998, we began to see a significant change in the golf industry. And we recognized that there was probably going to be a time where we might have to close that golf course. We began telling folks in 2000. But we didn't have any secret master plan. We just wanted folks to know, in the interest of honesty, that the economic viability of the executive golf course was coming into question. And by 2006, we were running a deficit of a couple $100,000 a year.
I see. Okay. And that's actually the crux of my question has to deal more with public safety, not the golf course. So perhaps this slide may be helpful. But I have a lot of information, but it appears we're looking at in the neighborhood of about 450 units to fight in the west side development. Just not federal, but just the west side.
Yes, Andrea's got a range there. I think right now the development agreement contemplates 600 units with a high range of 758. If the VRH is age restricted, so that would add another couple hundred units.
So maybe 750 to 1,000, is that?
No, 600 in the west side right now.
Okay, and then the latest information I had from the Institute of Transportation Engineers is that we're going to generate trips perhaps 6 times that number daily. Is that about right? 6 to 10?
Depending on the type.
Right, depending on. So we're looking anywhere from 6,000 extra vehicles daily in that area. So my concern now doesn't seem to have been addressed. I talked to the Planning Commission about this back in 2016. I responded to their DAIR. But dealing with Serrano Parkway, you have 2 roads intersecting just to the east, yes,
Right there.
just to the east of El Dorado Boulevard. That's very problematic. And I want to know, it's not addressed anywhere as far as how traffic would be mitigated with traffic coming down Serrano Parkway at speeds of upwards to 50 miles an hour. And it's like this is totally ignored. And so I know you're addressing other aspects on Appian Way, which is way out yonder. I don't see how that kind of came into the picture, but I'm more interested about the cars at Serrano Parkway, the traffic, and the public safety aspect, and how that's going to be mitigated. Not Park Drive. Park Drive is a whole different animal. You're converting a private road into a public road, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that is a whole different animal, but if we could just address Dorado Parkway, I'd be with that.
I know it's been studied extensively, and I think perhaps rather than me try to play traffic engineer, maybe I'll just ask you, Dave, to respond to that as best you can. As Tim said, there is extensive traffic studies. Anyway.
Should be on.
Oh, okay, the mic is on. So just, I'll kind of review the access assumptions for the project. Could went over these, but I'll start at the north end of the project. So connection of the project to Wilson at this location, full access. There'll be a partial access intersection at this location. So that'll allow right-in, right-out movements and left-in movements, but no left-out movements. And again, these were, the access assumptions here were developed with the county, with safety in mind. So when we look at those locations, safety and operations in mind. As well as the access locations here on Serrano Parkway, schematically shown in this location, but the exact location will depend on safety, site distance, and access for those. So that's a detail to be determined once more specific information is available if the project is
Can we move on to the question?
in this location, the access would be right in, right out only, so no left out or left in movements to the north side. And again, on the south side, there would be right in, right out movements and left in movements at that location. So that's a location that with the golf course, that access is the same as what's proposed, except limiting the left and out movements at that location.
Hi, my name's Skip Quain. My wife and I live in the first village above the old golf course. On the back of our house looks out at Silver Valley Parkway. It's supposed to be right below us. So my question is, as your traffic studies brought into consideration the large number of people going in and out of Costco at all times, especially on the weekends, also interfering with schools and that on Silver Valley Parkway, cars will be coming in from 4 or 5 different directions. So my question is, Costco gets a huge number of people during the week and a huge number of people, especially on the weekends. So I ask again, does your traffic study include that large volume of cars?
The assumptions for the Costco site, which isn't shown on there, but that's Eldorado Hills 52 parcel. Yeah. EDH 52, as it's referred to, is a commercial project. So commercial land use was assumed. So build out of the commercial land use for the location where Costco is going to be located was assumed in the analysis. Now, Costco, there isn't an application present at Costco, or there was not an application, and Costco wasn't even contemplated when the analysis was conducted. So, specifically, Costco wasn't assumed, but commercial land use and build out of that area was assumed, consistent with what was anticipated in the general plan at that time.
Good evening, Mr. Bowman.
How are you? I haven't seen you for a while.
For those of you who don't know me, Kirk Bowman and I served on the Serrano Owners Association board together. Me for a couple of years, Mr. Bowman for 2 decades. And Serrano is well represented here. I see a lot of faces I recognize, and at least a couple of directors that are currently sitting on Serrano Owners Association board. So I thought I'd take the opportunity with some directors present and Mr. Bowman at the podium to ask for some clarity on how you're proposing to remove anything from the Eldorado Hills specific plan, specifically D1, Village D1, Lot C and D, both of which have been annexed into the Serrano Owners Association. So I think I heard you say that the Eldorado Hills specific plan governs Serrano, but in fact the CC&Rs of the Serrano Owners Association govern Serrano. And once the parcel's been annexed into the Serrano Owners Association, all the powers of the association therefore apply. That includes assessments, which is currently being litigated and is in a class action phase of the lawsuit right now. And as well, the power to hold them into the association unless they go through a process by which they're de-annexed. And the de-annexation process is such that it requires a 2/3 vote of the non-declarant membership. So my question is this: how do you propose, having had Village D1 Lot C and D1 Lot D be pulled out in your plan proposal, how do you propose to remove them when you've been assessed on Parcel 5, D1 Lot C, at least for some period of time, and you've voted both those parcels, the 155 lots that you're suggesting are transferred, you voted those every year since Toronto's been operating, 1996-ish, the most recent director election last year. How do you propose that those mechanically are removed?
We don't. We're not proposing to de-annex that land from the existing Serrano Owners Association. These are planning areas, one of which is the El Dorado specific plan, and hopefully there'll be a central El Dorado specific plan. But the two aren't. If I had promised you a scintillating conversation about how Owners Association works, you probably all would have left a long time ago. But there is no proposal, no contemplation that the lands that we are suggesting be moved from the El Dorado specific plan to the central El Dorado specific plan be de-annexed from the existing Owners Association. Just not part of the proposal. It has nothing. They kind of have nothing. One has virtually nothing to do with the other.
So why even bring it up?
Well, we met with several owners who lived in D1 early on when we had initially decided that we would actually move forward with the tentative subdivision map on D1 Lot C and D1 Lot E. And at the time there was concern about asbestos. We then had a follow-up meeting with them and said that what we proposed to do is take those out of the El Dorado specific plan with their existing land use designations, of which there's a development right of about 135 lots. We could move them into this new plan and rezone them permanent open space. But there's no proposal to de-annex that land from the Owners Association.
So again, in that same statement, I heard you say move. I don't understand what move has to do with this, or why it would be part of a new plan area. I mean, that's certainly what's being proposed here, is that it would be part of a new central El Dorado Hill specific plan, is it not?
The answer to your question is that we felt that this designation would be more permanent as open space than any other. So, but again, there's no proposal, nor is there any contemplation of a proposal to de-annex those existing lands from the Owners Association.
Are you refuting that the de-annexation provision applies, or are you saying that? I'm not sure I follow your answer.
I don't know what else I can say. There was no contemplation nor any plan to de-annex the existing lands from the Serrano Owners Association. Period.
So that means you'll continue to vote them? Is that what you're
I don't know either. We vote those or don't vote those. Yeah. But that's a separate document. It's a planning document as opposed to an owner's document.
Well, wait a minute. You're making a proposal to amend the document, transfer the property into another plan, and now you're suggesting it's a separate document. We're not addressing that document?
Let me try again, Dean, one more time. And I know you're the master at asking the same question over and over again. There was no contemplation to de-annex the existing lands from the Serrano Owners Association. There is a proposal to move some of that land from the El Dorado Hills specific plan to the central El Dorado Hills specific plan for the purposes of ensuring that that will be in permanent open space and giving up the development rights for that purpose.
So effectively, the Serrano owners won't recognize these members anymore because you're going to report something that refutes phase 2 of the Serrano development?
No.
No? Okay. Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Sorry we had to bring that up, guys.
Hi, my name is Mary Bowman. I live in Harmony View, and I have two questions.
Sure.
The first one regards the Serrano Westland plan. When Andrea was speaking, she was doing a comparison to what is the existing plan and the proposal, and mentioned that the numbers kind of seem not that out of sync. But when I looked at the Serrano west side, the existing was 135, and the proposed was 4 to 5 times that many, which seems a huge increase in density.
I think this is the slide to which you were referring.
Right, that's correct.
And the point we're trying to make is that in the current general plan designation for Pedregal or Ridgeview East is one and the same. Would allow for up to 624 dwelling units. The Serrano West Side plan, which is the lands that Dean was talking about a few minutes ago, there is an entitlement to develop 135 units. And the point we were trying to make was that when you add those up and you compare those to what we're proposing, they're about the same.
That may be so, but if you look at just the Serrano west side in that particular area, it's going to be so much denser than what was.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
So anyway, that's one. The other question I before I forget it is just nothing has been brought up about mitigation of Green Valley, which I think will be greatly impacted by all of this as well. Has that study been done on Green Valley Road and the impact it will have?
I don't know, Dave, can you respond to that?
Yeah, the analysis included the intersections of Francisco Green Valley, El Dorado Hills Green Valley, Silva Valley, and Green Valley. No impacts of the project were identified at those locations.
Okay, so then as far as the west side, again, that's my big concern is that all of a sudden there's going to be 600 to 758 units crammed into this area. And I know somebody brought up that idea of the SNEEDs and the senior housing, but 24 units per acre, I mean, I understand that you need to have higher density in places, but the reason we all moved to this area was a lot of the open lands, and I understand that that's going to be developed, but it just seems like it's kind of overkill trying to cram so much into that small area. So, I guess that's the way it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys. My name is Jim Pridemore, and full disclosure, I'm against this project. I have a few questions. How many people here received a disclosure about this?
You mean the mail that went out?
No, when you bought your home, how many people received that disclosure?
Which disclosure? Didn't receive it.
So no one would got the disclosure. There's a hole in the process. Let's see. The 190 acres open space, is that part of Asbestos Ridge? I mean, Asbestos Ridge is up on a hill.
What is referred to as Asbestos Ridge would be D1 Lot C.
And that's open space that you're giving us?
What we're suggesting is that right now we have an entitlement for about 65.
I'm just saying, there's a problem with that. I have a lot of problems, and I'm not going to debate them here, but I signed up to work with APAC so we can go through these things one by one. I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to present the issues with a logical approach to get it done. So that's just a few things. Village Park, this Village Park down there on the corner, when that's supposed to be up where Parker's office is, that was the Village Park.
I think he's using Village Green.
Village Green.
Village Green is where our office is, yes.
Right. Is that what that was intended to do?
No, that's a community park that's going to be developed by the community services.
Which one? Here?
Yeah.
And you're calling it Village Park?
Well, we're calling it, I don't know what to call it.
I'm getting a little mixed up now, because I'm seeing a lot of things changing here.
Okay.
For example, we were supposed to have 2 golf courses. Where'd the other golf course go? I know that the old one is closed, but it's just a rhetorical question. Where's the other golf course? We worked on this back in 2015, and things would calm down. Now we seem like we have a fast track to get this thing done. And One issue I have is not with you guys, it's with our planning department. I learned that 700 homes were notified to make comments on this process. Those 700 homes were within a mile around the area.
How far was it?
No, it's almost 8,000. It's an 8,000.
I mean, we sent out, I believe the county sent out about 8,000 notices.
Okay, that's my point. Back in 2015, 91% of the people in El Dorado County voted against this.
Dorado Hills.
I mean, El Dorado Hills. They voted against this. Shouldn't they have been included in this 7,000 notification? That to me is an issue that needs to be addressed. One more thing. Traffic signal on Appian Way. How's that going to be paid for?
Well, the answer is we will install it if it's necessary.
You'll install and pay for it?
Well,
Is that part of the deal?
Yeah. If you'll have an answer, I'll give you the answer. The answer is that if it's required by the traffic studies, we will install it. Most of these improvements are included in the county 10 feet program, for which we would ultimately receive a credit or be reimbursed. So every time there's a house built or a building been purchased, somebody pays $30,000 for traffic improvements, and the county has a program set up on when these things are built, when they're needed. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Nice talking to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Hello, Richard Kashishin, Green Mountain Hills. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a few questions. Open space. Does that mean it's always going to be open space, or does that mean that can be built out in the future sometime? So both these plants have like 40% open space. Is that it? Open space, no more building?
Well, the zoning will be, if the plans are approved, it will be open space. Now, it will be open space. Like any, we don't have any plans to change it, nor do we want to. I think it's up to you guys to keep track of what the county does or doesn't do. We have no intention of changing it.
But can it, okay, well, let me phrase it another way. Does that mean that it can ever be built out or not?
Never say never.
We would deed restrict the open space property.
So you can build it out in the future?
No, I think what he's saying is that if it's going to be designated as open space, you can deed restrict it as such when you're developing the approved uses like the residential, the CLC, when those areas develop in the planned footprint, remaining green areas open space is what remains, and we could put a deed restriction document on that open space parcel that says in perpetuity this shall remain as natural and disturbed open space.
So somebody has to write something up to clarify that, I guess,
and
right?
we worked it out with the county too, so.
But it's open space now.
Right, but I'm just saying, I understand there's this project that they're trying to put through, and it's like, we don't know what it's going to be like, 50 years down the road. I mean, if that's going to be the extent of it or not, I'd like to understand if that's it. Okay, so it sounds a little tenuous, but okay, it doesn't sound like it. You would have to write it up as that in your plan to the board of supervisors. So, are you going to do that? Is it you would still own the land? Is Parker, but who would own the land?
Well, ultimately, in the case of the west side, there will be two owners associations that will likely own both of those open space parcels.
Oh, okay. So in this plan, those open spaces will go to the homeowners association, or the CSD?
Homeowners association.
That's who controls the HOA.
So if you buy in that development, your HOA fees go into that. So does that mean that it's open space, but now it's like, it's not publicly accessible to everybody in EDH? So in other words, the HOA can put a gate on it, develop nice parks in there. Nobody else in EDH can enjoy it unless you bought a house in that area.
That's not the way we'd set up the owners association. If you'll remember what I said in the beginning, as it related to the trails, the concept and the plan is that that will be open to the public, but maintained and owned by the owners association.
Okay, I just want to have that clarified.
Sure.
Okay, another question on the traffic mitigation. I saw the different areas that you had in there, and it looked to me like all the assumptions were that the traffic flow is going to be going south on EDH Boulevard to 50, where I see lots of traffic because I live on the north side. On the north side of EDH Boulevard, where it chokes down to one lane in each direction, there's quite a lot of traffic like heading out to Rosedale, like Folsom Auburn and over the Dam Road. And I saw all the traffic mitigation plans on that south side of the map. Nothing on the north side. Why not? Why didn't you consider those? I mean, does that mean that nobody's going to be traveling north on EDH in any of those areas?
I'll let Dave respond to that.
Yeah, under each of the scenarios that I identified, there's a different distribution of project trips assumed. Existing conditions relies on existing travel to use that distribution. So to answer your question, yes, traffic from the proposed project was assumed to head north on El Dorado Hills Boulevard to Green Valley and to continue further on outside of into Sacramento County. So that was assumed. Same thing under the near term or the cumulative conditions. There was trips assumed and assigned up there. But as I mentioned, there were no impacts identified in those locations. So
No impact. I drive home, going northbound on EDH Boulevard, and there's tons of traffic already choked on that side. So
yeah, I would refer you to the documents that are up on the website. Take a look at those, review those. We don't have sufficient time to get into the details about that assignment. That information is in the technical analysis.
Oh, and the last question is this it for north of Highway 50? Is this the extent of it, or so there's about 800 units that your plan is here? Is that it? Is the valley, EDH Valley, all built out at this point, or is this just phase one or phase whatever of an ongoing thing? I don't know where the end is. Is this it for park development, or is there more land tucked away that I don't see here? None that you want. So this is it, 800 units, and you guys have built out your.
Well, we'll build out Serrano, and we will build this out. I suppose if there are other opportunities in the area, we take a look at it. We don't have this is the extent of what we can.
Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Nicole Nesbitt Boulder. Moved here in '84. I remember when Rayleigh's faced the other way. So I think obviously there's a lot of emotions from people who live near the projects, and then a lot of us who have been around for quite a while. Dorado Hills was not designed to be what park development has done with it, but they own the land and they've done what they've done. I think the flood of the Bay Area is because people don't want to live in the Bay Area, and doing this is very Bay Area-esque, if you would. A lot of homes per acre. So healthy things grow. Dorado Hills has obviously grown tremendously over the years. If you're able to buy the board for $8.5 million plus whatever proceeds go beyond, then good for you, and you've done it. You've gone beyond the 91% vote that the people said. So I do hope that the board listens to the actual citizens of the community. But if you're not successful on this go around, I would recommend that you do another study. The 9-year-old or however old the golf study is. I mean, since that time, Bass Lake Road driving range has closed. Most of us can't afford a private country club. The closest thing is Empire Ranch, which is really full. My brother used to golf at the Dorado Hills Public Course for a very reasonable student rate. It was awesome. I have a hard time believing that you wouldn't be able to make that a profitable business in this community, this day and age. And the thousands of people who have been added on the other side of the community since that time, there's got to be some golfers over there. So to say that that is not profitable, I would ask the planning committee would ask for a new study for feasibility, if not the golf course, and having a driving range. I like the comments that the gal said earlier about just make some changes. I don't think all of us, and the majority of us who voted against rezoning, would be against some more houses and some apartments. That some growth is good, but let's make it reasonable and maybe a little more like what those of us who moved to El Dorado Hills liked about the community in the beginning. And you can still make your millions, I promise you, with less homes. I think that's all for now.
Thank you.
Craig Peterson, El Dorado Hills resident. Just one comment on the traffic mitigation studies. I guess there's some kind of threshold that has to be exceeded before it's called an impact. As a few people have alluded, any increase will impact things, and this is a big increase. So I think just because the traffic studies, however they were done, showed no impact, we all know that's impossible. Question I have on the community benefits fee. I'm not a developer, so I'm not familiar. Those fees will go where? To the county. And it's called a community benefit fee. Is that your name for it, or is that a term that's commonly used?
I'm not aware of any jurisdiction that charges a community benefit fee. This came out of the process that the Board of Supervisors developed in 2014 or 2015 as related to projects like this. And I've not ever heard of it before. Nobody in my industry has heard of it before. It's just
it seems like a misnomer to me because it's called a community benefit fee, and yet it doesn't go to the community that's impacted. What it more sounds like is a inducement to get 3 votes from the supervisors to push this thing through, or a bribe. Something else like a bribe, and
Good job.
Just a quick question and then comment. My question is, do you have children in the El Dorado School District?
I do not know.
No, personally. Does anyone on the board have children? You do? Right now, I don't know if you would take the time to visit the schools. They're over capacity. They're busting at the seams. So my question to you is, are there plans to build another school to house these children once you implement this program?
Well, the answer is probably not one you're going to like to hear, but how and where the students are housed or where the capacity is up to the school districts to decide that. You have 2 school districts in this case. You have the high school district and you have Buckeye. You also have a rescue, which kind of serves as part of the overall. I don't know where you live exactly. You may be in the rescue district. But
no.
It depends on where you are now, White House. But we pay an impact fee, which pays our fair share. And from that point forward, it's really up to your school board to decide if you need to add a school, where it's going to be, and how they're going to pay for it. But we clearly pay our residents. Our residents will pay their fair share of that extra needed capacity, whether it's adding to an existing facility or building a new one someplace else.
Okay, is there somewhere we can gather more information about that? Are they involved in the plan?
Having been paid pretty close attention to that. All the school districts that I mentioned, Rescue, Buckeye, and the high school district, do annual updates of their enrollments and their projections about this time of the year, maybe a month later, maybe like in October once they find out who's actually there. You can visit those websites at Buckeye, El Dorado High School District, and Buckeye, and search for. They have an annual update that they hire these experts to come in and say we have this many kids and these many are coming and here's the future growth. So those studies are updated on an annual basis. So
they may not visit the schools. The kids are sitting on the floor because they don't have seats. They need to visit the schools.
It also doesn't include the summer companies.
Right. She made a good statement there. It does not include the students that.
Did you mention your name? Can we put your name in? I didn't hear what your name was.
Why are you going to come after me?
Oh, that makes sense.
No, Marta. M-A-R-T-A.
So, Marta, I'm going to just
comment
on that. you know, when they circulate, the county circulates these draft environmental impact reports, they send it out to about 30 agencies. APAC gets one because we do comment on things, but they send it out to all the school districts, they send it out to the utilities, they send it out to the fire department, they send it out to the irrigation department. And about the 10 draft environmental impacts I've looked at over the last 5 or 6 years, the school districts never respond. They don't even make the time to make a comment saying, okay, if Toronto's going to build 700 homes or 1,000 homes, all right, what impact will that have? I've never seen a school district respond to this, a specific request for comment, because they either throw it in a trash can, which I firmly believe they do, or they decide it's not important enough because they will get their fees either from the developer or from the mellow roofs fees that buyers will pay. But they don't even take the time. I think people, if you're concerned about the schools, it's not here to complain, it's not the planning commission to complain. You really got to go to the Buckeye and the El Dorado School District board meetings and ask them what the heck they're doing. Why aren't they even responding to a request for comment? Because they should have comments on this.
I'll add one more thing on that too. It is the school boards, and right now the projection on most of the school districts around here is for declining enrollment, even with houses being built. There's some methodology behind those assessments. Building a lot of senior and age restricted housing. They don't believe the needs there. The only school really that has a growing population is Oak Ridge, and Oak Ridge we know is over impacted. But that was their opportunity to make a comment and say, hey. Yeah, this is an impact. As Tim suggests, they probably look at it and go, okay, more fees. Now, what they do with the fees, that's the board. But Tim's right. If you have a question about what Buckeye for the elementary school district here does, or with Rescue a little further out, as Kirk was saying, or the El Dorado Union High School District, you need to ask those boards. We elect them. So those are where those questions need to go about the school. And why aren't they responding to these things? And why is everything not an impact to them? And ideally, I suspect I won't say it, but it's because the fees are coming in. But the other part of that too also is that there's a bond measure coming for the El Dorado Union High School District in 2020. I believe there's one being proposed for Rescue Union School District in 2020, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars. You need to talk to the school boards. They need to hear from you if you elect them. So, and that's where all of that.
Sharon Peterson. I was just hoping you could explain the process to me. What is your authority to make a recommendation? Then where does that go? Who gets it next? Who are the decision makers? Can you guys help me with that?
I was taking notes.
You were looking at him, not me.
Right, and hopefully not the decision maker.
Well, these guys.
Stop looking at it. Well, number one, we aren't decision makers. We're volunteers, and we're hoping to gather resident input because it's valuable. Maybe you don't like a project, maybe you love a project, but any input we provide can make a project a better result, whether you like the result or not, as long as it's an improvement. That's what we're doing. This is the feedback is to the decision makers. We talked earlier, there are going to be 4 planning commission hearings regarding this project.
And will you be there, or?
Well, I have a job, so no, I won't be there tomorrow. When I can make time, I will. But our planning commissioners are from each district. We have one from District 1. There are a couple in the audience tonight, District 4, District 2, 3, 5. So they're meeting tomorrow. They'll be hearing this project. They'll be hearing input from staff. The applicant's making a presentation. And then this is a different project. It's not typical that a project gets 2 planning commission hearings. Now they're going to do 4. One will be here in El Dorado Hills in the evening for people like me who work during the day and can't get to Placerville at 8:30 in the morning. So when that meeting is here, that is your opportunity to make your public comments in person to the planning commission. You can still make public comments being writing an email and submit it. We'll put it on the APAC website, but you can email it into the planning at bdc.gov.us. And the planning commissioners see those comments, as well as the planning staff. And then the Board of Supervisors, provided that this project as proposed is a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors, I believe, is 2 hearings, if I remember now?
One here,
in El Dorado Hills in the evening. And that's unusual. That doesn't happen. So, but I think that they recognize that with the population center we have here and our inability to be in Placerville during the day, they want to dedicate that opportunity. One of those meetings will be here so that people, residents can be up there and say face to face with the supervisors, here are my concerns. And Kim mentioned earlier, when we make these concerns, everyone has opinions and everybody, can get angry, everybody can be happy. Those sentiments typically don't sway a decision maker, they're looking at the facts. So you can have an opinion, but as long as you have facts to back it up, that will make a difference. And, it results in a better project when we're doing our job, right? As residents, so.
Are any of the commissioners, planning commissioners in the room right now? You could identify yourself just so we would know. Great. Anyone else? Just one. Okay. So at the end of the day, it's 3 votes from the board of supervisors would determine the project.
And the planning commission.
And what role does our election, where 91% of the people in this community said we want to continue to have the zoning on the old golf course to be recreation, and this is completely different from what we've already communicated to everybody at a county level what the community feels. Where does that fit in this?
Well, to be fair, that was an advisory vote. It's not binding. And I think we all recognize that there's people who are upset about that. And there are people who, about 91% of the community are upset about that. Yeah, I know. So it did express a sentiment. So the only thing I would advise is that we have one elected representative here. Technically, parts of 2 other districts represent Eldorado, parts of Eldorado Hill. You need to make those sentiments known, either via public comments at the meetings or via public comment that you submit in writing, either through mail or through email. And the one that I hear from planning commissioners and from supervisors, people need to show up. Okay. And that's tough, as we discussed earlier, because those meetings are during the day and not here. Okay. And people are busy. So if those opportunities are here for a planning commission meeting here, show up. If the board of supervisors meeting here, show up. They're trying to accommodate us this time with evening meetings.
Okay, I've been here since '82, so I've seen a lot of change, and I've heard Toronto promise a lot of things over the years. Some have been right, and some have not. So I'm just going to look at your current plan, and I'm going to give the feedback of a person who's been here from '82. I used to ride my mountain bike in Toronto. I haven't done that since '93. And the reason where you have your open space, nobody's going to go up there, is because it's very steep. I don't know probably anybody here who goes behind the fire station to take a walk because it isn't a pleasant place. So to give that to the community is not giving us anything. You're giving us that because it's difficult to build and no one's going to go up there and so you can resell it in a couple of years and build something up there. So I would encourage that if you're going to give us open space we can use. And you have any idea what that looks like, you can go to Folsom. They've done a fantastic job of giving open space in the community for people to use. They have fabulous planners down there. They're giving us open space, nobody's going to. It's giving us nothing. So I encourage you to relook at that. Nobody wants to go to a park right next to the freeway, and nobody wants to live next to the freeway. So once again, you're giving us nothing. Give us a nice park if you're going to give us something, because that really says, I'm not giving you anything. So those are just some small things. And I appreciate your study on traffic, but anybody who's lived here and seen the changes, most people in my neighborhood own 2 cars. And you're going to pay 800 units. 1,600 cars are now going to come onto Eldorado Hills Boulevard. Many people in this community are 2 working families, or one is taking the kids to school and one is working. They're going to be on that road during the busy times. You put 1,600 more cars on Eldorado Hills Boulevard and it's going to be a mess. So what people are going to do is just like you said, they're going to head up Wilson Way and go through Cuesta and go down through Folsom. And those are neighborhoods that are not made for people who are late for work and they're speeding and going to run over a kid. And those are the problems. People would be going through the neighborhood that's on the other side of the fire department that goes to that neighborhood. You get to the new street that's going to go over by Costco. Those are not places we want people taking their cars on their way to work. And that's what's going to happen. Google Maps is going to be out and that's how everybody's going to go because it's too crowded. So I don't care what your study said, anybody who's lived here, 1,600 cars between 7 and 9 is going to be a mess. And so where you're going to go is going to be dangerous places for people who live in this community.
Yep.
And people who live in Ridgeview, that'll be an easy way for people to go. And that, again, it's a community. We don't want people racing down the big hills to go down to Folsom to get out of here. So those are just a few things that you could change that might make it more tolerable. And I agree with other women who said it used to be one home for 10 acres. It was that. And of course it's changed as you guys have redesigned this over the years. A few less homes there might be nice, or do something like Folsom has done to make that open space where it's nice to live there. Nobody wants to live in a community like Daly City where there's homes everywhere. People moved here. I moved here in 82 because there was open space. There's very little left. And what you're giving me is really ugly. So you need to do a bigger effort because people don't want to live in a place that looks like Daly City. Thanks.
Can you get that one? And before you do your comment, we're already over on time. So any other comments we have tonight, quick as we can, because we're trying to stay in the good graces here because we get a free road. So
Just two quick ones. One of them, maybe at your next planning meeting in January, maybe address if this area you're proposing is at a moderate or a very high risk rather than higher area. It makes quite a bit of difference. So there's already a preliminary lessons learned report out from Paradise. I don't know if you're looking at it. For instance, they are saying the roads are too small. The roads need to be wider. He showed a road that dead-ended with a barricade. I can show you one down in the road from Sunridge Meadow and down to the Carson Ranch area with a barricade across. I ran with the fire truck just to get through. Don't have barricades with knobs on them. The other thing, the little pictures with the houses. I think the fire department has a vegetation plan that needs to be incorporated. All of your houses have trees right next to the house. That's a taboo right now. So don't show us those pretty houses, show them with gravel around wood chips or whatever Mike Lilienthal is going to allow you to do. So anyway.
thank you.
So let's open up.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Layla Bertram, and I have one quick question for you. Do any of you guys remember when there weren't many buildings and cows? Yeah? Well, this is turning into the Bay Area right now. And how come, why don't you guys put it to a vote one more time and listen to our voices?
Are there any other public questions?
So much for questions or comment. First, thank you to the Parker people for coming. They knew it's not going to be a friendly environment, and yet they're here, and they made, I think, a very professional presentation from their perspective. These guys up here are all volunteers. They're doing a ton of extra work. Because this is the biggest crowd of people I have seen come to any meeting, be it the community advisory meeting or anything else, or a prior APAC meeting. They happen all the time. They discuss critical issues, and we all sit home and watch Monday Night Football or Survivors or something else. We got to participate in our own government, because when we look in the mirror and we don't like our government, you know why? We see ourselves and we're part of the problem. Now, if this many people will get up to Placerville tomorrow and listen and talk to the actual planning commission, you're going to set a tone. They're going to start to understand that we're not really pleased with this concept for our community. That's going to set a tone in their mind, and they're going to remember that. But we got to be there. That's all. Thank you, guys.
Okay. The hour's late, and I think we've got a lot of good questions tonight. Planning commission's tomorrow, if anybody's available to go to that meeting. It starts at 8:30. I believe there's one project, maybe two ahead. Two ahead. So I think we're talking about by 10 o'clock for public comment, maybe a little later, but I will be there at least by 10 if you want to make public comment at the planning commission. But there will be a discussion, and you might want to be there for the full thing, just so you're educated, you're making informed, reasonable comments.
By 9 o'clock, you can expect probably the staff report. Typically, that staff report will take an hour. The planning commissioners will have questions on staff as well. Following the staff reported questions, I believe Kirk, your team is going to do your presentation about an hour as well.
It'll be similar to what we talked about.
Okay, so about an hour as well. Then there'll be planning commissioner questions of the staff. Excuse me, of Kirk and his team. So probably the earliest public comments would be at 10:30 or 11. But again, you never know. The commission changes and stuff like that. If they delay the other projects, this one might be considered sooner. But if you want to be there, you want to hear the staff presentation and hear this presentation pretty much again, show up at 9 o'clock. And then public questions will start as soon as the commissioners ask all their questions, both the staff and the developer, and then it's open for public comments. It may start before lunch, it may start after lunch, but if you want to be there for everything, be there no later than 9 o'clock. Can I ask, is anyone planning on going tomorrow? It's in Placerville at Building C, Berlin. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. APAC has been around for over 20 years, and typically what we do is we take people from the community who are interested in particular aspects, environment, traffic, land use, and they sit down together and they take a look at these plans, and then they give recommendations, and then those recommendations are presented to the APAC board and to the APAC members, and we vote on those plans. So everything that's been said tonight is great, but you have to put it in writing so that it can be presented to the board, so that it can be presented to the people to our supervisors and to the planning commission. And keep in mind that many of the people on the planning commission come from Tahoe and other areas who really don't know some of the problems that we have down here in Dorado Hills. You have to keep that. So I'm saying what you said tonight is really, really great, but you have to sit down and organize it and put it in a meaningful way so that it can be presented to the planning commission and to the supervisors. And thank you.
Can I say something about that? There's a website out there, excuse me, parksnotparker.org. That website has a petition on it. You can go in there and initiate a petition to save the golf course. And if we get enough votes, maybe they'll listen. They're not listening because we had 91%. And that to me is a travesty. They're just totally ignoring us. And that's so arrogant. I can't stand it. And what more can we do? It's really sad.
But we're doing it now, right? So this is what we can do. I know, we're doing it now. So, but as John and Tim mentioned, if you make a contribution, make a contribution.
Right.
And we appreciate you being here tonight to do that. So with that, I don't want to let you guys go home. It's a very late night for APAC. Our next meeting is back here on the 11th of December. We'll have an agenda out before that. If you're not on our email list, please sign up before you leave if you want to work on this project. Our email address is on the agenda. Thank you for coming, and thank you guys. It's
Good job. You keep a low profile there. Good job. We didn't even know you were.